Today's story is one of mystery, oddity, and the unexplained scientific phenomena. The story of unexplained strange events happening to an average person. This is the story of Henry Thomas. If you do enjoy the content, why don't you pick up that subscribe button, take it up to the top of the Empire State Building, and then chuck it off. But make sure you tell the like button to stand at the bottom and catch it. If you are partial to the strange, mysterious, and sometimes spooky in storytelling format, then this is the right place for you. Make sure you ring that bell so you never miss our weekly uploaded videos. Henry Thomas, born April 2nd, 1906. Henry worked as a steelworker in Ebb steelworking yard since he was a young man, and would do so for the majority of his life, ultimately retiring in his mid-60s. Upon retiring, he would move into the small mountain town of Roseau in Breconshire County, Wales. Apologies if I mispronounce that. Welsh words are sometimes very difficult. From here, Henry lived a quiet, peaceful life in this cold mountain town. Oftentimes, he would spend his evenings relaxing in front of the fireplace, watching television. However, on the cold, dreary evening of January 5th, 1980, when Henry was 73 years old, his normal nightly ritual would go completely wrong. You see, as we said, Henry, especially in the winter months, had a bit of an evening routine. You see, in the mountain village that Henry lived in, temperatures in the winter would oftentimes drop to below freezing, so it was very common for members of the communities to have roaring fireplaces that they would cozy up next to. This is exactly what Henry would do. See, he had a big, kind of lazy boy-esque armchair in the center of his living room, near his fire and near his TV. Henry liked to start a fire, get a nice warm fire going. He had a bunch of kindling laid out next to his fireplace. He would then go to the television, lean down, turn the little knob on the old school TV, turning it on to his favorite channel, walk over and sit down in his comfy lazy boy, and then take off his slippers and take off his glasses. However, this night when he settled into the chair, removing his slippers and his glasses, something very strange and odd happened. You see, that night, one of Henry's neighbors would later report to the police that they had smelled some strange smoke coming from Henry's chimney, but they simply assumed that Henry was clearing out some garbage or possibly some food in the fireplace, as this was somewhat common practice for people around these parts, depending on what it was, but he did note that it did smell quite foul. Little did Henry's neighbor know, but this was Henry being burnt alive in his favorite chair in the middle of his house. You see, when Henry sat down that evening, something very odd happened. According to the coroner and autopsy report, a strange fire somehow broke out on Henry, erupting quickly and violently, spreading from his head possibly down to his midsection, eventually catching on to his chair. His chair would burn just as quickly as he burned. All that was left of Henry was a pile of ashes with his skull sitting in it, as well as a remainder of his knees down, still in their trousers. The chair would also continue to burn, but eventually would stop, half of it crumbling away onto the ground. However, quite strangely, this fire wouldn't spread, as when police eventually came to investigate the home, there was a ring of ash kind of encircling maybe an inch out of the chair, and then it just stopped. Following day, police officer John Hermer would investigate Henry's home. Upon entering the house in the living room, he described it as being bathed in a strange orange glow. Now, the police officer wouldn't know this at time, but this orange glow was a combination of the light filtering in outside with the evaporated human fat from Henry's body. Gross. The officer surveyed the scene, seeing the remains of the body, the broken chair, the fact that the burning seemed to stop lower into Henry's legs. His trousers still attached to his pant legs as well. The TV was still on, though the screen was burnt out and the knobs had been melted a bit from the intensity of the fire. It still technically worked. The officers would go and examine the hearth, the fireplace, checking for any sort of residue or any kind of potential leads as to how this fire started, but they were very surprised to see that the fireplace seemed completely clean. There were no coals lying around, scattered outside the fireplace. There were no burn marks, scorch marks. There was no indication that this fire had gotten out of the fireplace in any way. There was no strange burn marks on the ground. They were all localized to the area that Henry died. Now, this immediately started ringing alarm bells and questions in the officer's mind, as once he conveyed with his other fellow officers who arrived later, a lot of them believed that this was some kind of work of spontaneous human combustion. Now, spontaneous human combustion is a phenomenon described when, for whatever reason, human bodies, whether they're alive or dead, go up into flame with no available source of ignition, no source that can be registered or examined for how the fire started. It's largely attributed as kind of a pseudoscience quack phenomena, but yet there are a number of strange, odd stories dealing with spontaneous human combustion. Was Henry's case a potential example of spontaneous human combustion? Well, the forensics team didn't seem to think so, as they found a small piece of fabric within the fireplace. They theorized then that Henry had probably reached into the fireplace to either stir the fire or get it going. He possibly hit his head or hurt himself. He then caught his clothes or maybe his hair on fire. He didn't realize it. He sat down in the chair, and then from there he burned to death. Now, this story alone leaves a ton of holes that we could poke through, but you see, I don't need to, because later on these forensic experts found that the cloth that they found within the fireplace was actually a piece of leather. It did not come from Henry's clothes, and it did not come from his body in any way. The questions do arise as well when we test the forensic experts' theory. You're telling me that a full-grown man in his 70s managed to catch himself on fire, proceeded to turn his television on, sat down in his chair, took his slippers and his glasses off, all without realizing that he was caught on fire. As well, even if I grant you that, once the man realized he was on fire, surely they would have gotten up in a panic and tried to put the fire out. However, the source of the ashes seemed to indicate that the fire burned so hot and so violently that the man had no opportunity to get himself free of these flames. Also, there's the strange incident of the fact that the fire did not spread from Henry's body and the chair. It seemed to burn extremely hot, hot enough to burn a man to ashes, but not long enough, or I guess powerful enough, to spread to any part of the house. How could this be? Ultimately, Henry's death would be ruled as death by burning from the police department and the coroner's office. No mention of any kind of spontaneous human combustion anywhere in the death report. But Henry's death would still leave a lot of questions, even for many of the officers who at the time still believed that this was some kind of a case of spontaneous human combustion. The case of Henry Thomas still puzzles experts to this day. If I've yet to see any example of someone who can feasibly explain how this man could have died and how the fire could have not spread. If anyone has an answer for this or can tell me, please let me know in the comments down below. Was this a case of spontaneous human combustion or just a freak accident that really has a very simple explanation? I guess we're gonna have to leave it for you to find out. If you are fans of the weird, unexplained, and mysterious in story format, then this is exactly the channel for you. This is all that we upload, at least one video a week on Dr. Novis. If you have a strange story or know of a strange story, please let me know in the comments down below, and if I find it interesting enough, we may even feature it here on the channel. As always, guys, thank you for watching my video. Stay safe out there. It's a spooky world.